Cledge Shed is a local independent retailer of used and repaired 125 motorcycles.
Now, I was lucky enough to actually go there myself. Big shout out to George for showing me around and having a great discussion. I love how the place looks with the bikes on the left for sale and the bikes on the right that are being restored, just in case you see something you might fancy in the future.
That's right. Please check out their website, link in the description below.
Hello, I am the Rhythmic Biker. And did you know Japan accounts for around 50% of motorcycles manufactured in the world? Last week, we met Jemma and John at Brands Hatch for Gemma's first ever solo race weekend and to experience our first taste into the world of motorcycle racing. This week, you'll think you have deja vu.
These are the wolf tails.
Shall I go first then? I mean, as I lead on the track most of the time.
You're pushing it. It's a long walk home.
I've got plenty of bikes. I'm Jemma Hannaford. I'm an accountant and also a bike racer and rider.
And I'm John Hannaford.
And so I didn't introduce you as my house husband. Sorry, can we do this again?
No. Hi, I'm John Hannaford. I'm a born-again biker and road racer, and I'm Gemma's house husband, apparently.
Yeah. Who looks after our two lovely, beautiful, pretty cats. So I passed my test when I was 31 after riding a 125 for a year. I then did numerous track days. I say numerous, probably a couple a year, up until last year when John and I started Team Skid Marks for the first taste of racing. And then this year I've gone solo and I'm racing with Bemsy with the Kawasaki Team Green Senior series. That's my biking history.
I've been in motorcycling most of my life, although I did have a short layoff of 35 years. Done track days around the country, I've done track days in Spain, raced in the Isle of Man, fairly heavily involved in motorcycling for most of the time.
So this week, we are rejoined by Jemma and John. But this time, they've brought not one bike, not two bikes, but 3 bikes. Let's waste no further time and get straight in to the deep dive. Hello and welcome to the deep dive. We're joined once again by Jemma and John, who have kindly come to our studio this week and brought along a fleet of racing motorcycles. First things first, Jemma, we were with you last episode for your first solo race weekend at Brands Hatch. Would you care to tell us how you got on in your second race of the day?
Yeah, sure. It was okay. Obviously, we knew the quick shifter had failed, so we had to unplug it. So I went into the race without that. So I had to go back and use the clutch, which I'd spent the whole weekend getting used to not using. It was fun. It was a real good laugh, actually. I went straight to the back at the beginning, as usual, managed to gain a position, and then had some good dices with the guy in the next position up, and it was neck and neck the whole way, and it was real good fun. And because the conditions weren't brilliant, I knew I wasn't going to make any better time, so I just went out and had fun, basically. So it was brilliant. So what we've done now, the next day we ordered a quick shifter, which will be ready for Silverstone in a couple of weeks' time. So
Fantastic.
I'll have it back.
Already prepared.
Exactly.
And so now you've experienced your first solo race weekend with it. How are you feeling about the bike? Did you gel with it as much as you wanted to? And yeah, just overall impressions of racing weekend with it.
Yeah, it's a steep learning curve. It always was going to be. I feel so much more confident on the bike now than what I did at the beginning of the weekend. It's very different, obviously, to being a road rider first. So I'm used to riding a Gixxer 750, so it's very different to that. The power delivery is very different. With the Ninja, it's either on or off, whereas with a Gixxer 750, it's sort of a gradual on. So yeah, comparing it to sort of, I've got 6 different bikes at home, so it's just different, and it's, trying to go from one to the other can be a bit of an experience at times.
Of course, I can imagine. And you've mentioned there you've got 6 different bikes at home. In terms of your personal preference, where does this line up against the fleet?
Oh, well, it's probably my favourite track bike. So I have, obviously this, I've got a Gixxer 600, which I use on the track and the road. And I've also got a Yamaha FZ 600. Which is a classic bike, which again I use on the track. I do parading with that one. I also have a Kawasaki ZX6R, which I use on the track, and John's had an experience with that, which I think he'd rather not remember. So we are thinking of parting with that one at some point. But obviously my favourite is my road bike. I mean, that's a Gixxer 750 and I absolutely love it.
John, Gemma's just mentioned there an experience. I mean, I'd love to hear about it if you'd be willing to share it with us.
Okay, if you twist my arm. Oh, that's a bad choice of words. Yeah, we were at a track day at Snetterton, and
I kindly let him.
She generously loaned me the ZX6R to take out on track. And basically the bike tried to kill me. Coming out of Agostini's, I lost the back end on the power, and it threw me up in the air. I landed on the track and the bike stayed upright, travelling at about 60 miles an hour. Came into me twice, it hit me twice as I was tumbling down the track. I was fairly sure that I'd hurt myself quite badly. I thought I'd broken my back at one point, but when I sort of got my breath back, I was in a lot of pain. I rolled over to push myself up with my left arm, and I felt this concertina down, and I thought, that shouldn't do that. So the medics came over and I said, I think I've broken my arm, and I was crying like a baby, of course. And they rushed me to Norfolk Norwich on blues and twos because it was quite bad. Found out that I'd shattered this bone in four pieces. So I was off work for 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just the risk, isn't it, associated with it?
Just one of those things, I mean, I've come off bikes. I have broken my leg before racing. I've broken loads of bones loads of times, but that was the most painful.
And Gemma just said there about considering maybe getting rid of that. Is that just maybe because after you've had an off, especially quite a severe one as it sounds, is there too much bad blood between you and the ZX6, or is it just a case of... To
be honest, I didn't gel with the bike at all. No. I really didn't.
Especially when you put diesel in it.
Oh no, there's just more. The story unfolds.
Yeah, we did have a track day, and I took my Gixxer 600, my Kawasaki ZX6R, and John took his Daytona 675R, and somehow both of my bikes ended up with diesel in them, yet John's bike didn't. I'm sure he's just trying to slow me down.
It's the favouritism, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't think it's your favourite bike, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. I don't like the gearbox, and it's well known that the gearboxes are particularly difficult to gel with. So that's not my favourite bike.
It won't be a bike that you miss when it's gone.
No.
And obviously with this, again, I know it's Gemma's solo race bike, but you yourself have had a go on it. Where does this compare, and in your personal sort of list of your fleet of bikes as well, where would you put this amongst them?
Where would I put it in the list? I don't think I can include it in the list, really. I think it needs to be in a list of its own.
Your list is very different, though, isn't it? You've got very sort of 2 strokes, whereas mine is very 4-stroke orientated.
Yeah. So this bike is a great bike to to go racing on. There's no doubt about it. The series, you can tell that by how popular the series is. And the 300 cc size has been promoted right up to the world level, really. So it's a good series to start racing in. As far as that compares to my list of bikes, I have a similar list to Jemma. I've got an MV Agusta F3 RC, Daytona that she mentioned, 2 Yamaha 350s, which were one's a 1971, one's a 1973, TZ 250, which we have over here, and a TZ 350.
Fantastic stuff. Obviously, the fleet is incredible to hear about how many bikes are at home, and it must be impossible almost to.
We have to keep building sheds in the back garden
just to constantly
house
keep housing more and more.
And then, that one out. Oh no, we've got to move all these out.
That is brilliant. Well, thank you for bringing the Kawasaki Ninja 300 back in. It's nice to see it under the gleaming lights, and we wish you all the best for your second race weekend at Silverstone in a few weeks' time.
Thank you. This is our little endurance bike, which is obviously tiny, so we end up riding it around go-kart tracks. So the Free Tech Endurance tend to use go-kart tracks because you don't need obviously licenses, which means anyone can race, which makes it fun, and also quite a bit of carnage happens. I mean, I like the go-kart track because I love go-karts. That's how I sort of got into sort of racing. And when I met John, it kind of moved towards bikes. I went from 4 wheels to 2 wheels. We often go-karting now, and I often beat John. It's very rare. He puts in the time better.
It's rare, but it does happen.
Very, very rare.
But it has happened.
It has happened, and, you know, and now I'm actually beginning to get as quick as him on the bike. In fact, I did end up doing a quicker lap time on this with the Free Tech first race than John. So
that's fine. I'm cool with that.
Maybe you were holding back.
I didn't want to cry.
It's all right. when you have your first race weekend on this one, that'll be the time to put the money where the mouth is. I love that. Do you have this sort of personal, like, do you have a little bit of a rivalry when you're on there? I know obviously you're a team and everything, but does
competitive.
it?
Yeah, I am.
Incredibly competitive.
Yeah, I mean, we it's not only, you know, we play pool, we do bowling, 10-pin bowling, and there's always a competitive edge to it. I'm a sore loser, me. I absolutely hate losing.
Yeah, she does.
So yeah. Sorry.
That's fine. Is John at least a humble winner when he wins? No. Is Jemma a humble winner?
He has a diva. No. He very much has a diva attitude. Yeah, definitely.
And obviously that must be brilliant to have when you're part of a team with the endurance racing, because yes, okay, you can have your personal off-track battles, if you will, but you are a team at the end of the day. Yeah. This is obviously, you know, what you've got at home. You know, you must have had so many sort of experiences with this bike together. Even just
experiences and crashes. It does encourage you to take liberties, actually, because it's so light, it's so easy to throw into corners, and as Gemma's already mentioned, typically the Free Tech Endurance events are held at karting tracks, which are very tight corners, lots of them, and to maintain a good lap time, you have to really push it hard, and you find the limitations very quickly sometimes.
And I think, unfortunately, I hold the record for most crashes on this as well. That is a record I don't like to hold, and I will let John have that one.
Yeah.
But
you can keep that.
Yeah. But the good thing is, you know, if you come off there, I mean, even I can pick it up. I mean, there's no way I could pick up my Gixxer 750, but this, you just pick it up, get back on it, and carry on.
This is it, much more manoeuvrable. This must be quite ezy to have at home with the rest of the fleet compared to when you're having to move bikes everywhere around, maybe swap.
Yeah, we've got 12 bikes at home, including these, and it can be a logistical nightmare at times. So we try and plan ahead. Well, I want to ride that one at the weekend, so let's bring that one to the front.
In fact, we actually had one in our living room over Christmas, and instead of having a Christmas tree, we actually decorated the bike to
with
be
Christmas lights. Of course. Because who needs a Christmas tree when you've got motorcycles?
We're actually in the process of rebuilding it because, well, what was that? Oh, well, that's right, you crashed it.
Again.
Fixing up
I'm going Marquez style here.
Marquez style, yeah. Sending it sideways down
Finding the limit and then coming back from it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So is that a joint project at home? Is it like rebuilding this bike? Yeah.
Yeah,
we often have them in the, I mean, this year alone, I think we've had it in the lounge, we've had bikes in the dining room, in the conservatory. So, yeah.
That's what I imagine now, just the dining room table, sat on the bikes to eat the dinner. Do you know what I mean? Nothing's cooler than that, is it really? Yeah. No, that is fantastic that you've, because it's obviously so manoeuvrable, you can just have them all around the house, if you will. Yeah. Nothing better, is there?
Yeah. And quite often, rather than move 4 bikes out of the side garage to get another one through, I'll bring it through the house instead.
Quicker and easier, is it? Yeah, of course. Just wave to Jemma as you go past me. Don't worry about this one. Yeah. Bless.
Yeah, we often find, I go to unload the dishwasher and there's often sometimes bike parts in there as well. So they're all around the house.
Whoops, just trying to get them clean, is it? Yeah, polishing touches ready to rebuild in the engines and stuff. That's brilliant. John, before we move on, with this bike, you did point out to me a problem just before we went onto the camera. Would you care to let us know some of the issues that you can?
I told him not to mention this. Well, we're actually in the process of having new rear sets designed for it. We've got the gear change side sorted out fairly quickly, but on the rear brake, we've noticed that we need to make some modifications to this so that the original master cylinder will fit it. So at the moment you can see that it's only mounted on one point where we need to have the bracket moved to allow us to mount the master cylinder in its natural position without changing any of the hoses.
Okay, fair enough. And how are you going about getting that new design? Is that being customised by someone else, or is that very? Yeah,
we're working very closely with a company that makes a lot of aftermarket accessories, shall we say, for race bikes. So they've already made us the top yoke. That's replaced the standard yoke. So this is a lighter version, and they've made it the clip-ons and the bars for us as well. So there's a lot of work going on in the background right now.
That is absolutely fantastic. I find it a very striking bike to look at, and from having a bit of a clean of it earlier, I was just stunned by how light all the fairings and everything was. And once again, we'll wish you all the best in the endurance series once that kicks off. From a Kawasaki to a Honda to a Yamaha. Let's scoot round, why not? We seem to be covering all the Japanese manufacturers at the moment. I have pretty much, from the moment this came into the studio, I have said that this is just so striking for me. It takes you back. John, tell us a bit about it.
Right, well this is a Yamaha TZ250L, and it was made in 1984. It's a 2-stroke twin-cylinder, water-cooled engine. It produces around about 60-65 brake horsepower and is very light. It's lighter than Jemma's 300. It's about the same weight as the Honda. It's the last of the piston-ported engines that were made back in the day. So this is basically a post-classic race bike. And back in the 70s and 80s, you could go to a Yamaha dealer, put an order in for a Grand Prix bike, hand over your $4,000, and they'd give you a Grand Prix bike, and you could then go straight into the World Championships and win a World Championship on an over-the-counter bike.
I love that. It almost sounds like the working man's race bike. Do you know what I mean? You just straight away, you've got your investment in. And what series does this race in with you?
Well, I'm running this in a 2-stroke series called GP Originals, and it's basically for 1970s to up to 1984 racing machines of that era, and it's typically the whole field or whole grid, if you like, is made up of 2-stroke race bikes. 250s and 350s. Now this competed against 350s back in the day, and I compete against 350s in the GP Originals event. They're very competitive against the 350s. They had about 75 brake horsepower output, whereas this is 60-65, but this is a lot lighter than a 350. So they were a good match for the 350s.
Fantastic. And in that race series, how popular is this bike? Is this something that only yourself races, or do you see a few of them now in the series?
No, there's quite a few of them out there now. I mean, obviously this is the last of the line, and so it is the most developed of that type. So everybody wants the 1984 version. The 1983 and 1982 versions are seen in the series as well. But this is the one to go for, because this is the top of the range, if you like.
Fantastic. Gemma, coming to you. I want to get you involved in the Yamaha discussion here. Yeah. What do you think of the bike, and have you had a go?
No, I don't think John would like me to have a go. I think he says I don't have mechanical sympathy, which you obviously need for a 2-stroke. With a 4-stroke, you can rev the nuts off it and it doesn't matter. I just think I wouldn't want to try it, I have to say. I'm definitely more 4-stroke than 2-stroke. I think I'll leave that to John. But this is what John grew up with, and he rides it so well. And I just think they look lovely on track. Yeah,
it's interesting to know about the gearbox is completely different to a road bike as well. They run what is called a close ratio gearbox. So first gear is very tall. It's almost like third gear on a road bike. So when you get the go on your grid, you have to rev this to the right amount of revs to get it to take off in what is essentially a third gear.
Yeah.
And all the other gears are very close together after that. So they're like 500 revs apart.
Oh wow! So once you're into second, it's very much then you're up
bang,
then.
Bang, bang,
bang, bang, bang.
Yeah,
fantastic. Gemma has mentioned there about mechanical sympathy. Do you care to elaborate a bit more about the mechanical sympathy required to race one of these?
Yes, they are very. They can be very temperamental, highly strung 2-stroke engines. And you do need to be aware of things that can happen with them. You can over-rev them, and they can seize, which makes life quite interesting.
And expensive.
And expensive. I'll let Gemma ride my Pride and Joy 1973 Yamaha at a track day. And
had to twist his arm.
Melted a piston.
Oh.
No, it wasn't her fault.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
She just happened to be on it.
Oh, yeah, coincidentally, yeah.
No, it was ignition failure. But yeah, you just have to be sympathetic to what the engine is capable of, and don't go beyond those limits. Like on the 350, it will rev to maybe 12, 13 RPM. 13,000 RPM, sorry. But you wear everything out so much quicker by doing that. So we tend to keep the revs down to about 10.5.
Okay.
And try and keep to that so that you prolong the life of the engine. Back in the days when you race these in Grand Prix, once the Grand Prix race was over, everything on the top end of the engine was thrown away. So you had to have new pistons, new rings, new clutches. That's it. If you look in the schedule of the handbook for the Yamahas, it tells you what you have to change at what mileage. It's they're very, very finely tuned devices.
They definitely sound it, and I do apologise in advance because I know you're probably not going to want me to bring it up, but you've mentioned that the bike's not quite in running order at the moment, and the engine has been sort of just rushed back together just to come onto the show today. So many thanks for that, but you care to explain what's going on at home on the workbench?
Yeah, it was on the workbench in a million pieces, but I thought I couldn't bring the bike here and have a hole where an engine should be. So basically, I've just thrown it together without pistons and without clutch, and the gearbox is in there, but there's nothing in there basically. No. So just to make it look like it's a proper engine.
What are you doing at the moment? Are you going for a rebuild just before the series begins, or yeah? And what does that entail? Is that pretty much replacing the top half of the engine, or are you going even deeper in?
Typically what you do at the end of each season or before the new season starts is that you strip it completely down. You check all the bearings, all the seals, O-rings. O-rings are actually quite crucial in a 2-stroke, so you can't have them failing, which I have had happen before. So it's all stripped down. the crank is sent away to have new bearings put on the crank. Basically, what do? You raid your bank balance.
Yep.
I was going to say, because obviously with the solo racing on the Kawasaki Ninja 300 and the endurance racing on the Honda CBR 125, you've both mentioned about them being quite cheap ways to get into motorcycling.
Yeah.
This doesn't sound like it's a cheap way to get into motorcycle racing at all, and this sounds like it does come with its sort of expected cost.
Absolutely, which is why I don't run it in any other series other than GP Originals, because it's only five rounds, whereas a normal club racing championship is at least 8. And so, you know, I could be looking at a crank rebuild halfway through the season, and a crank rebuild can cost you anything up from £400 to £800.
It just sounds like you do need a big financial backing on this.
Pistons are over £100 each. I know it's 2 of them.
But still, it's more, like you say, it sounds like they do need to be replaced every now and then.
Every 200 miles.
Oh wow, so that's pretty much, what are you looking at in terms of a race for this series? Like how many laps are we talking? What's the average time as well? And does practice and qualifying come into that as well?
It depends on the circuit, depends on the length of the circuit as well. So typically a race meeting, you're going to probably clock up around 50, 60 miles.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. So literally 3 races then. 3 races and that's it. You're
Yeah.
already looking at new parts.
Yeah.
So John, it sounds like you've got quite an investment, quite an attachment almost to this bike and the series. I have to ask, how is that investment? How is that sort of emotional attachment to this bike? Why this bike and why that series for you?
Right. Well, it goes back to when I raced when I was younger, in my 20s. So this was a machine that I always wanted. I could never afford. So I raced earlier machines that were cheaper that I picked up second hand. So it's what I used to do. I've raced 2 strokes, but this machine is the one that I always wanted to have and never had. So back in the day, I was in the Royal Air Force and I raced for the RAF. I did 3 Manx Grand Prix at the Isle of Man, and 2 strokes are just in my blood. You know, it's just something that really ticks the boxes for me.
This is fantastic. Obviously, you've mentioned about racing a few years prior, racing for the RAF. You may have noticed from maybe some of our wider angle cameras, we have some trophies here. So you've had some success in the racing game. Would you say?
Yes, I was what would be the word? Modest.
Modest.
Success.
Trying not to show off too much here. No.
Yeah, one of the trophies is from Oliver's Mount, which I went to for the first time in 2020. Always wanted to race there when I was younger, so it's another sort of bucket list thing, really. I got the opportunity to go and came away with a trophy. I wasn't expecting to win at all, but it was over a 4-race event at Oliver's Mount over 2 days, and I was competing in the GP 350 class on this 250. As I mentioned before, the 250s are a good match for 350s, and I actually won the GP class, 350 class on it. So I came away with a trophy which I was never expecting to get. It was a brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Very underdog story in that
absolutely.
respect.
Yeah.
You've got a lot to inspire up to, isn't it?
Well, we've got the trophy for the endurance, so my first ever race.
That's your
we
claim
got one.
to that,
Yeah,
to the
exactly.
racing victory.
I'm taking that.
Honestly, no, the both of you, that is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing all 3 of them in. It's so nice to almost have that Japanese variety here.
Yeah.
I think it's very clear to see where John's allegiance lies with Yamaha.
I thought I'd stay neutral.
Stay neutral, yeah. Is it always going to be your first race bike being the Yamaha and this one? Are these always going to be your favourite? Are these going to be they're the ones you love most?
Yeah, I mean, I have 3 race bikes. So I've got a production race bike, 1973 350 Yamaha. I also have a TZ 350, which I have raced, finished second in the Classic Clubs Championship back in 2019, that was, I think, wasn't it? And I do enjoy riding the 350, but this is more of a challenge as well, with it, because it being a 250 against the 350s.
got
It's more of
to
a
give it that
challenge.
bit more, braver into those final corners.
Exactly,
This is it later on the
exactly.
brakes.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for bringing them all in. And same as both the other series, wishing you all the best for the season. And hopefully some more trophies on the way.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I was in the RAF, I was watching the racing one day and I stupidly said, I'm sure I can go faster than that. And one of my mates said, go on then, give it a go. My very first motorbike race was at Cadwell Park. And I'd been riding on the road for 2 years, thought myself to be a really fast rider and my mates seemed to back that up. So my first race I was really keen. First thing that happened was the flag dropped and I went to start the engine with the kickstart, because back in those days we had no electric starter, and found that I hadn't turned the ignition on. I'd failed to prepare. Once I realised that and started the engine, the rest of the field had left me behind. I got lapped in my first race, which was a real shock because I'm sure I was really fast. But then I found out that actually you have to be really, really fast to race. Exactly 12 months after my embarrassing moment on the grid with the ignition turned off, I actually won my first race at Cadwell Park, and this was in the wet. And I think that's basically where I found that I could actually go quite quickly in the wet, or quicker than the rest of the field. It was a wonderful feeling to cross the line first. It's great to have a wife that actually shares your passion. We're both very keen motorcyclists on the road. There aren't too many married couples that are racing currently in the UK. It's a wonderful experience to have your wife as a motorcycling buddy.
Although I would ask that again in 6 months when I start beating your times.
I know it's going to happen. It doesn't concern me that much now.
Okay. I got involved in motorcycling because of John. Didn't really have much of an interest before I met John. We worked in the same office building, and one day I saw him turn up in his red Triumph Daytona. That was it really. And I thought, I like that bike. And then I took a second look and then thought, actually, no, the guy's not too bad either. And that's how we met. He offered to take me out the back of it. I enjoyed it so much and I thought, you know what? I could have a go at this. You know, like I said previously, I've done a bit of go-karting and I love speed, just took to it so well. Yeah, all John.
It's all my fault.
Yeah,
as
your
usual.
fault. Having a husband who enjoys it just as much as me, if not more, is great. He understands what I'm going through. It just links us even closer. It's just so nice to be able to share that passion with someone so close. Just be able to spend all our time together doing everything that we enjoy. I know that's not a typical marriage, but it seems to work for us.
So our wedding was different. Jemma and I decided that we would make it a motorcycle-themed wedding. Where do we start? We started with designing the table layout.
Yeah, we had so the table layout was the TT circuit, and the tables were named after corners on the circuit.
Yep.
We had castor oil cans with flags in as centerpieces on the tables.
Instead of flowers.
Instead of flowers.
Yep.
There was just flags everywhere. We had 2 little marshals as page boys.
Yep.
Their little sort of bibs on, carrying a toolbox which had the rings in. And we also had the bikes at the venue as well. So I had my Gixxer 750, John had his Daytona, and he also had his race bike, his TZ 350. One of his mates had his TZ 250 there as well.
Yep.
And the venue kindly let us let John and his mate race around the venue on their bikes, which was great.
Yeah, it was amazing. That was my first time back on a bike for some time, which was really good. We also decided that we would have wedding rings designed to reflect our motorcycling passion, and so we had both rings designed to look like the replica of the Pirelli Supercorsa tyres.
So John's got the back tyre, I've got the front tyre. So John's the power, I'm the steerer.
Well, wasn't that cute? We've seen that motorcycling doesn't need to be enjoyed alone. In fact, it can be shared amongst our closest loved ones. Massive thank you to Jemma and John for coming on the show, not once, but twice. We wish you all the best for your upcoming season. This video has been kindly brought to you by Kled Shed. Remember, we would love to have you here as a guest on the show, telling us all about your crazy experiences and stories as a biker. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I am the Rhythmic Biker, and these are the Wolf Tales.
These are the Wolf Tales.